Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We have for our webinar with ourselves, Jarrang and Spike, on From Data to Decisions, Enhance Your Marketing Strategy. I'll just give a couple of minutes to let everyone get settled, get themselves a cup of tea, coffee, something like that. And while you do that, I'll just introduce myself. I am Carl Bavis, part of the team here at Jarrang. Just want to point out as well a few housekeeping things before I pass over to our two speakers for today. So we have, or you should have at the bottom of your screen, just a little Q&A button. So if you've got a question now, or if one crops up throughout the webinar, just pop that in there, and we've allocated some time towards the end of today's session just to go through any of the questions that you have. So the agenda for today as well. So we are going to look at the importance of reporting and measurement, paid media involvement in that, email marketing's involvement, and then integration as well. And our two speakers for today, we have from Jarrang, Ben Hocking, who's a client success manager, and we have Matt Wilkinson, who's head of paid media at Spike. Before I hand over to Matt, I'll just quickly give you a synopsis on who and what we are here at Jarrang. So we're an agency that we live and we breathe, and we're 100% dedicated to email marketing, and we have been since 2003, where we help businesses across a wide range of sectors to create award-winning email marketing campaigns and programs to fuel growth and to drive revenues. We work with your marketing and your business needs, and with a bespoke service that fits just what you need, giving you that capacity and expertise. So I'll hand over to Matt, who'll give you a bit of a rundown on Spike before we kick off with the webinar.
Yeah, so Spike, we're a performance-led digital marketing agency. So we have a lot of strength in the search sectors, as you'd imagine, but really our kind of focus is on kind of bringing together those unified strategies. So not just across search, but we also look at shopping, social, PR, outreach, and just kind of how all of that ties in with with the kind of broader strategy of a client's business, how it kind of interacts with the different channels that they might be managing through other agencies. So my expertise is obviously within the paid sector, but we work kind of really closely across the business to make sure that all kind of ties into to what's going on elsewhere, kind of within and outside of Spike's involvement.
There we go. Yeah, thank you very much, Matt, and thank you for the introduction, Carl. I'll kick off today's webinar just by going through the importance of reporting and measurement. And as Carl mentioned in the rundown of the agenda, then we'll get into a little bit more specifically on paid media and email marketing. But firstly, makes sense to start with the role of data within digital marketing. And if there's any takeaway from this, it is that everything when it comes to data in digital marketing is connected. Data is almost at the core of these connections, and it's the thing that manages to connect all of the different steps that happen along the way in marketing. You'd find it very difficult to have that overall picture without the data connecting the dots in between. There's a lot of benefits when it comes to data within digital marketing, so much so that if I were to list them all, we would be here for a 3-hour webinar, but rather than a 45-minute one. But just to go through a few of the benefits, understanding your customers, what they're all about, why they're with you, that comes via data. Predicting consumer trends, that comes via data. And you'll see these are all connected, but you're able to improve the return on investment on your marketing campaigns as a result of understanding your data. So by understanding your customers, your consumers, you're able to make changes to the way in which you go about your marketing strategy, whether it's from a tactical standpoint or otherwise. By utilizing those changes, the ROI comes from that. So you can see that everything is connected when it comes to digital marketing and the data included within. Just a few questions here that would be very difficult to answer if you don't have data on your side. So should I update my email template if we're looking at an email marketing specific question here? You might think email templates and design is almost at one end of the creative spectrum when it comes to email marketing, and data is at the other end, but in reality, they're far more connected than that. So should I update my email template? You can make a best guess, but ultimately utilizing data is going to be your best source of understanding here. So heat maps when it comes to your campaign. So working out where on your emails you're retrieving those clicks, that can be a great use of data to work out what part of your email template might not be working as well as the others. And maybe that should be your focus if you're putting together a new email template. Another example, should I send my campaigns in the morning or the afternoon? Again, you can make a best guess, but if you're utilizing data, it's a much more informed decision. And then the last one there, should I create a segment for those that have purchased a certain item in the last year? Again, without data, it's a very difficult question to answer because that data will lead you to how many subscribers are going to be in that segment that you're putting together. Do you need to extend the segment out a little bit more if the number of subscribers in that segment isn't what you thought it was going to be? Is it worthwhile? Again, all of these questions and many, many more come about as a result of data. I mean, why reporting and measurement are crucial. It speaks for itself in some respects, but without assessing the results, how can you expect to improve in any capacity? We're obviously talking about marketing here, but that would work in pretty much any industry where you always review the results of what you've tried to accomplish to then try and improve going forward the next time you put together a similar campaign. Again, it's about eliminating that guesswork. And I've put here that you'll struggle to hit KPIs and benchmarks without reporting, but in actual fact, you'll struggle to put any KPIs together without data and reporting on what you've done previously. In that respect, you might be setting unrealistic KPIs or too realistic KPIs where it's easy to hit and you're not striving as much as you should be as a business. So putting together those KPIs and then working out whether you're hitting them or not hitting them all comes about as a result of this reporting and measurement. Allow data to be the backbone of storytelling. This is really important. So data will always tell you a story. It will always be the backbone and the sort of core of all the assessments that you put together based on what you've already done. Just allow data to be the thing that makes that report or that assessment flow. And you can offer actionable optimism because data might be the backbone of storytelling in terms of your strengths, but it will also be the case in terms of your weaknesses. It will identify exactly where you need to improve, which is ultimately a good thing. There are always weaknesses. Every company has its own weaknesses. So being able to identify those accurately and then being able to offer actionable optimism off the back of that is the best way forward. You can identify this is where we're at now. It's not where we'd like to be. This is where we can get to. This is how I know we can get there. Data. And I think this is the last slide from me for a little bit, but benefits of informed decision-making. Trial and error, there's definitely a place for when it comes to trying things out. But ultimately, you want to reduce the time spent on trial and error as much as you possibly can for efficiency's sake. It's to no one's benefit if you are making a complete guess about what might work, trialing 50 things, and then eventually on the 51st, you get to the right answer. You might have eventually got there, but it's definitely not the easiest path in order to do so. If you're able to put together really informed hypotheses based on your data, then suddenly you're not going to get all of them right in terms of, I think this will lead to an increase in click-through rate. Maybe it won't sometimes, but you're going to get a far higher success rate based on that informed decision-making. It's increased confidence, and it's a greater accuracy in terms of predicting commercial results in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So, yeah, I guess to go into a bit more of the specifics of kind of what all of that looks like within paid media. So, as you know, I guess sort of most people are aware, the kind of real strength within paid media, and kind of why it often forms a big part of a of a kind of marketing plan, is because it offers a lot of immediacy, accuracy, and control, and that really is driven by the data that sits behind it. So it's really important to have that accuracy and control because often we're looking at putting fairly large sums of money behind the activity that's running, and that needs to be underpinned by kind of by sound data, whether your paid media activity is kind of doing that sort of BAU job of kind of, you know, giving a kind of backbone of volume and you know, kind of revenue or leads or whatever within the kind of marketing plan, and you know, kind of testing and refining that, you know, working towards kind of ongoing ROI, CPL goals, that kind of thing. Or, you know, the kind of, I guess, the more sort of dynamic side of kind of giving tactical flexibility. So, you know, kind of allowing you to sort of upweight specific promotions, or, you know, kind of push certain types of products seasonally and that kind of thing. You know, regardless of what you're using it for, it really comes down to kind of having the data to be able to measure that success, but also, you know, having the data to be able to kind of point you in the right direction as to where you should even be starting, you know, what you should be looking to promote and where and how. But, you know, further to that, as we'll kind of go on to in some of the coming slides, it's not just about that kind of data from a kind of, you know, crunching numbers and measuring performance perspective, but it's also the kind of the targeting and the optimization signals, which are really, really critical in terms of, you know, building out, you know, audiences, and feeding that data into the system that you know, kind of really powers performance. So, you know, why is data so important? I mean, I think I've kind of just touched on a lot of that, but you know, really the crux of it for me comes down to the fact that it's kind of, you know, reporting and analysis is important enough in itself, but you know, that's kind of one sort of slice really of the significance of data within paid. So yeah, those kind of targeting optimization pieces are, you know, arguably kind of even more important in kind of getting to decent results and to you know, paid media campaigns that work. And that really comes down to, you know, I guess sort of pretty hot topic at the moment of AI, but you know, AI is not a new thing within paid. Well, it's not a new thing within a lot of areas, within a lot of industries, but you know, a lot of the kind of basics of you know, say Google Ads are really underpinned by AI and have been for, in some cases, a decade or more. So things like that kind of ad rotation optimization, you know, the kind of bidding strategies, targeting, you know, how ads are kind of like dynamically adjusted for, you know, specific users, specific contexts. All of that is kind of really powered by AI, and has been for some time. And really, that AI is nothing without data. So, slightly cheesy analogy, but you know, if AI is you know, the car, then data is very much the fuel, and without that data, it's going nowhere. You know, the AI can't make any decisions. It can't do anything without that data to fuel it. And in terms of that data, again, as we'll kind of touch on a bit later, both quality and quantity are kind of really, really important. So, you know, if there's kind of question marks about the validity of the data, that's obviously going to set things off in the wrong direction. But equally, if, you know, there's not a lot of it, then it's not really going to allow, you know, either you or the AI to kind of make many meaningful decisions. So, you know, quantity is really important, and kind of managing that. So in terms of what data is important, so obviously kind of, you know, most things are kind of feeding through into your reporting data. You know, that's how you're going to be measuring success at the end of the day. But you know, those two kind of big chunks really that are kind of that feeding through into that are your audience data and you know, your conversion data. How are you defining a conversion? How are you measuring it? How are you valuing it? And they'll both feed into not just the reporting data, but into that targeting data. So, you know, basically how those decisions are being made on, you know, who to put ads in front of, and when and where, and, you know, on what devices, and all of those kinds of things. So just to kind of start with audience data. So, I mean, you could kind of go obviously very in depth with this, but just roughly speaking, to kind of break it down into the sort of three key types of data really. So you've got your kind of, I guess, your original, your kind of old-fashioned version of data, which is kind of very much powered by cookies. So, you know, putting a tag on a page and saying, you know, a person has visited this page, I'm going to put them in this audience list, simple as that. So, nice and straightforward to set up, easy to maintain. They do take a bit of time to kind of build that data. You've not got any data from around that audience until people have actually started visiting the page after you've tagged it up. But the big issue really with cookie data is just all of that whole discussion around cookies, which has kind of been going on for a number of years. So they're increasingly impacted by people's privacy settings and cookie blocking behavior. And ultimately they are on their way out. So increasingly not just users but actual browsers wholesale are kind of blocking those third-party cookies. So within the next kind of year or so, all of that kind of cookie-based targeting is going to kind of largely die off. But thankfully we do have I guess two other arguably more powerful options. So you've got your in-platform targeting. So basically all of the data that Google or Facebook or LinkedIn has about those users. So we can kind of tap into either the kind of known data that Facebook has because it's people have that in their profile information, or the kind of inferred data that I guess typically Google will lean more on, that we've seen this user has exhibited these types of behaviors, so they're probably this age range, they're probably interested in these types of products and things like that. So again, really easy to implement. The problem here is obviously we've only got what the platforms provide us to work with, and it can be kind of sort of pretty black box. So to say, in an ideal world, sort of gold standard really, you'd be using your own customer data. So it's kind of, I guess it's not new news that first party data is king, and kind of obviously that kind of critical for any kind of email activity. But likewise, we can take that first party data, those kind of email addresses or phone numbers or whatever kind of customer data is available, and use that to kind of build audiences that are then kind of plugged into Google, Facebook, etc., and kind of carved up any way we see fit. So that this is another kind of really good area where there's kind of strong synergy with the email side of things, because any kind of lists that you might be looking at within email, we can kind of replicate those within a kind of paid media context, and kind of support that activity, double down on it, that kind of thing, as we'll kind of touch on later. So moving on from from audience data, conversion data. So I mean, in many ways, this could be the subject of kind of multiple, and has been the subject of multiple webinars in its own right. So we'll try and keep it pretty simple here, but I'd say really you've got kind of two things to consider when you're looking at conversion data, and that's what is it that we're looking to track, and how we're going to track it. I mean, I know that sounds very simplistic, but if we kind of start there and always keep in front of mind, your conversion data is everything that the AI has to work with. So if your conversion data is based on flawed assumptions, or the kind of the data itself is not particularly robust, then all of your results really are going to kind of be sat on that kind of shaky foundation. So really important to get this bit right and make sure that the AI is being pointed in the right direction, because as I've said, AI really powerful and can do kind of amazing things, but if you're feeding it junk data, you're going to get junk results. So kind of really important piece of the puzzle. So typically I'd say you want to start by asking questions a little bit like this. So they're going to vary somewhat depending on whether you're kind of in the e-com space or the lead gen space. Obviously there's kind of quite a bit of crossover between these. So within e-com, you might be looking at what typical monthly sales volumes look like. Within lead gen, obviously that's what's your typical monthly lead volume. But key questions like is all of that data, are all of those conversions visible through the site? How much is a lead worth? is there kind of significant variance between what one lead might be worth and what another lead might be worth, or return rates on certain types of products people might be purchasing. How long are sales cycles? There's kind of a lot to consider here, and I kind of in the interest of time, I kind of won't go into all of them, but I think if you kind of work through all of these, it kind of gives you like a really solid foundation for kind of hopefully kind of picking out some of those things that might be a challenge in terms of your data, and some of those things that you might kind of need to think a little bit harder around, kind of how do we solve that problem, and how do we make sure that the kind of the most valuable data is kind of is feeding the AI, feeding the kind of the system. And I guess it's probably sort of fairly obvious, but in terms of how damaging bad data is, so essentially all of those things that we've touched on as to what data can do, if you imagine all of that going wrong, then that's how damaging bad data can be. So poor business decisions, missing out on opportunities, even kind of before all of that, if you're forecasting or budgeting for for next year, you've got all kinds of potential issues there, even down to, it might not even necessarily be the results. You might be you might be kind of giving yourself all kinds of headaches in terms of staffing requirements. Maybe you've not got enough salespeople, or you've not got enough installers, or whatever it might be, to kind of follow up on the volumes that you're driving, because that data is kind of kind of not giving you the correct insight, basically. And on the performance side, I mean, obviously there's a kind of ton of stuff here. So if there's not much data, or if the data's not very accurate, then you're clearly not going to be making decent decisions. The AI is not going to be making decent decisions on your behalf. So in terms of how we kind of tackle, firstly, the kind of data quality piece. So I'd say data quality is certainly much more of a consideration within the lead gen space. There's a lot more complexity there in terms of the data, and I guess a lot more ways that data can be wrong or misleading. So most of this really is sort of fairly specific to the lead gen side of things. So you start by looking at the quality of your current data. Is everything being tracked? Are all leads in there? Is it accurate? How in depth is that data? Are there any obvious areas for improvement? So any gaps that would be sort of easy to plug? Are there kind of can you take some data sources from elsewhere and kind of sort of plug those into your CRM and kind of iron out some of those kinks potentially? And when it comes to kind of low quality data, how easily can that be sort of stripped out? So for example, if we're taking a load of customer data, are there kind of question marks around some of those particular fields where maybe those fields need to be kind of not used for data purposes, or are there literally specific records that might be kind of misleading or inaccurate that kind of need to be stripped out? And maybe even kind of taking a bit of a step back. So ideally we'd always be optimizing towards sales data, but actually do you have the kind of strength of your data to be able to do that? There's all sorts of reasons why you might not. So maybe the kind of time lag between a lead and a sale might be kind of long, or that might be really complex, or there might be some kind of gaps in your kind of data through there that might mean you might be better off looking at qualified leads instead of sales, or even literally just kind of stepping right back to kind of just measuring leads, and can you put values against those leads? So value-based bidding, definitely too big a topic to get into here, but that's potentially something that you could look at to try and sort of override some of those data issues in a kind of more sort of managed way, if you like. And lastly, could the data be misleading? So it might not be that there's anything wrong with the data, but if you kind of going back to the e-com side of things here, if there's certain products that have really high return rates, or really low margins and things like that, and actually all you're feeding in is that sales data, that could be causing problems. That could be essentially misaligning what success is for you with what the AI is considering success to be. There might, it might lead to kind of, really pushing a load of low margin products really, really hard because they're selling really well, but actually that might not be what you want as a business. So, they're all things that you need to be kind of considering in terms of what you're feeding in. And then I think finally from me, just the quantity side of things. So I think this is probably often overlooked in terms of just how important it is. But I'd say, when you're kind of building out accounts, when you're building out campaign structures, or kind of ad sets and things like that, try and think data volume first when you're kind of building that structure together. So if you don't have a huge amount of data, don't start by thinking we want to carve this up into 25 different audiences and 12 different locations and things like that, because it's just not going to work. It may be that you're better off literally throwing everything into one campaign, because at least then there will be the kind of data there to be able to support the kind of the bid optimization side of things. And ultimately, if you can't get to that kind of necessary data volume, then maybe you need to be thinking about taking a step back on what you're classing a conversion to be. So, sort of back to what I was saying before about, is a conversion a sale or is a conversion a lead? Well, if you're only getting 10 sales a month, then you probably need to be thinking about measuring leads instead of sales, because you need that kind of data volume to be able to kind of do anything meaningful with it. And I would say 9 times out of 10, more data is going to trump more granularity. So typically, sort of going back, I guess, sort of 10 years or so, when AI was a bit sort of less prevalent, there was very much a trend to kind of like have everything set up as granularly as possible to allow that kind of granular control. But a lot of that granular control now is being delivered by the AI. So as long as AI has sight of that data and kind of has a decent amount of volume to work with, then it can kind of deliver that granularity for you, provided you're feeding the right inputs in. And yeah, I'd say potentially you might be better off instead of breaking down by let's say keywords, maybe you'd be better off kind of grouping things together and kind of saying, well, what's more important than what someone's searching for is whether they're a previous customer or not, something like that. So you might want to kind of actually group things in different ways and split by audiences rather than kind of keywords or themes or something like that. So that's definitely another thing to consider.
Okay, great. Thanks, Matt. I will go on a bit about email marketing now, which is understandable given, as Carl mentioned in the intro, we are, as an agency, 100% focused on email marketing. So naturally, we like to shout about it quite a lot. We think it's pretty good. But having said that, we are the first to admit that email marketing works best when it's seamlessly included as part of an omni-channel approach. So it's going to vary business to business as to which tools you have in your toolbox and which ones you use more prominently than others. But email marketing works when it's placed in with the others. And there is this sense that there shouldn't be, an identical nature between, let's say, email marketing and social media, but there should be an element of both being immediately recognizable as belonging to that same brand, the same family. So any marketing material should really fall under that. Where email marketing really comes into its own is where it is used as an effective one-on-one tool where personalization and relevancy is key. So, of course, naturally, depending on the size of your database, you could be talking to a lot more than one person, but you're in a way not necessarily doing a let's say 1,000 people to one company communication. It's 1,000 different one-on-one communications is the way I think it's best to look at it. And the more you can use personalization, the more you can use automation, as I'll come on to in a moment, the better relevancy you'll start to get. And that relevancy should then lead to results, whether that's conversion and transactional or otherwise. So email marketing, delivering intelligent automated emails and journeys is really key. Again, this is going to vary based on your business and indeed the industry you're in, but just to offer a few examples of where automation can be really valuable. Certainly it can take a lot of the strain off in terms of transactional elements of your overall communication strategy. Email can do a lot of heavy lifting there. Cross-selling opportunities if we're looking at e-commerce quite specifically. So you can really get intelligent with your data to say that this person has purchased this product, therefore they are most likely to go on and purchase these 3 products. Using that data just means that email marketing can act as a non-invasive, helpful way to extend that journey on beyond that individual purchase. I guess related to that as well, replenishment emails can be quite useful, again, depending on if it's relevant to your business. But if you do have that data to hand to say that the majority of people who purchase a certain product will then purchase the same product, let's say 3 months later, suddenly you can use your email marketing in a really intelligent way 2.5 months after the initial purchase to offer that reminder, offer that nudge. Again, it's non-invasive and it's helpful, it's relevant to their individual purchases and what they're likely to need again. Benchmarking is a really effective tool when it comes to email marketing. So reporting on the campaigns is essential, but if you're just looking at a set of numbers without any context, it's not going to mean a great deal to you. So being able to use benchmarks is really effective. It can point you in the right direction of what you need to improve. So if you are benchmarking and you realize your open rate is lower than, let's say, other companies within your industry, that's maybe where you need to put most attention, is towards subject line improvements and testing there. And I'll come on to testing in a few slides' time. Or maybe clicks is where you're struggling. So in that case, maybe it's something relating to your layout and imagery, or maybe it's related to the tone that you're not getting quite right. Again, without this benchmarking, it's very difficult to understand where specifically you need to improve. If you go with a more general approach of something needs to improve, you're less likely to see the results and the benefits of doing that. Of course, that leads to the question, what are you benchmarking against? Now, we know benchmarking is important, but what do you choose as your benchmark? Industry averages are very useful, but you do need to pay attention to what exactly you're benchmarking against. So you can find a load of different email marketing benchmarks on the internet. Different companies will provide them, but they're not necessarily working on the same set of data. So you might have one company that is very specifically only looking at promotional emails to use their benchmarks. Therefore, the benchmarks are likely to be a little bit lower. Then again, you might have another company that uses the same industries, but is also looking at transactional data. Naturally, transactional data is going to have a higher level of opens compared to promotional. Therefore, the benchmarks might be unachievable if you're only looking at promotional. It's just some of those things to pay attention to before you start using them too much. And taking them with a pinch of salt is always useful, because even though you might have a lot of similarities with other companies within your industry, there are also going to be key differences. You're going to be at different stages of your life cycle as a company. You might be a fresh startup. You might be fully established. An industry benchmark is going to include both. So you just need to use them, but you just be aware of some of the limitations. And then lastly, you can use your own performance as a benchmark. So if you have enough necessary data from, let's say, 12 months ago, and again, that can vary depending on what's most useful for you as a time frame, you can use that to see, okay, are we up year on year? Are we down year on year? And then get into the whys. A few reporting tools and metrics. So what metrics do you want to pay attention to? Naturally, you should really be paying attention to all of these, and it's maybe just a case of which ones you're paying attention to more. But delivery percentage, obviously very important. What percentage of the emails are you trying to send are actually making it through to the intended recipient? So the flip side of that, I guess, is bounce rate. Open rate is another one to look at, as already described. And you'll see the next two, click-through rate and click-to-open rate, ever so slightly different. Click-through rate, you're comparing it against the number that has been delivered. Click-to-open rate, you're just looking at those that have opened the email. They can be useful in their own ways, but certainly click-to-open rate can be quite neglected, but is very useful for identifying what in the email itself is working and what isn't, because ultimately, you don't really need to look at people who haven't opened the email to work out what's working in the email itself. They haven't seen it. Unsubscribe rate, very important, naturally. And then any conversion and transactional material that goes beyond, I guess, the standard within email metrics. And it's always important to gain the full picture. So if you are only looking at one or two of those statistics, you might be having something that's a bit misleading. So just an example here, you've got two emails. Email 1, you've got an open rate that's 10% higher than email 2. Great. If you look at that in isolation, you might want to put all of your attention into email 2 and trying to improve that. But if you're not looking at click-through rate that is 4 times higher for email 2, you might not be getting the full picture. Again, if you're looking at click-to-open rate as an example here, only 1 in 10 are converting on that first email, whereas 1 in 2 are converting on that second email. So whilst the email 1 open rate might be higher, it's not doing a very good job, or at least comparatively, to get people to click through. So that's where your attention should go. Again, it's about what should I be focusing on in terms of those improvements. All of the stats painting a picture, that's how you're going to get there to the right answer. And it's important to go beyond the standard metrics. So yes, whilst those metrics I just described are really important, you want to look into third-party tools such as Google Analytics to give you the next point on from when we almost lose track just from an email perspective. How does that convert? So again, you might go back to the previous slide and say the 20% click-through rate is far better than the 5% click-through rate. But maybe the 5% click-through rate is leading to an increase in revenue. Again, that's something that you want to pay attention to. And a few other ones that I've just listed out here, email insights that are really good to pay attention to. And these will often go beyond what is capable of a standard email service provider as a platform. But certainly dark mode usage is something to pay attention to. That can lead to decisions made on how much you should focus on that if you are building out a new template. Inbox placement. So I've described what delivery percentage is, but inbox placement is a little bit different. So this is looking at those that have been sent the email and have been delivered, but where is it being delivered? Is it going directly into the inbox or is it going to junk or spam? In which case, if your inbox placement is a little bit low and more are heading into spam and junk than you would like, that can be something to focus on. Time spent on the email. How quickly are people clicking off? Are they there for a few seconds? Are they there for much longer than that? Domain and client usage is another good one. Are more subscribers using Gmail versus Apple, let's say? Again, that can be quite useful to know what to pay attention to when you're building out your campaigns. And then lastly, mobile versus desktop. So across the industry, mobile is becoming far more prominent nowadays. I'd say that trend has almost happened in its entirety, but it's still heading a little bit towards mobile. So you'll want to pay attention. You're likely going to be building out your emails on desktop, but you need to be paying close attention to what it looks like on mobile, because it could be a case where as much as 3/4 of your audience are actually opening it on a mobile device. And then a little bit on A/B testing, which is really useful. So there are plenty of best practice principles when it comes to email marketing, but that can only go so far. There are things that you should always do, but what works for you specifically, it's a very individual thing. It can be down to your industry, but it can be down to your individual company. The only way you're going to work out what works for you that maybe doesn't work for another company is to do these A/B split tests. It can give you that info just to be just be very careful. Obviously, you only want to test one variable at a time, because if you're testing multiple variables at a time and you see an improvement, what are you attributing that improvement to? Is it the first change, the second change, the third change? If you're only changing one thing at a time, you can say with confidence what it is exactly that is leading to that increase. And then a little bit here on the synergy between paid media and email marketing. So I'll take this first slide and then hand over to Matt. So benefits of converting paid into email subscribers. There's a cost efficiency of this. So once you've got the email subscribers acquired, they can be engaged with again and again at a lower cost. Again, focusing back on that personalization, that relevancy, and how targeted those comms can be. And then long-term engagement is another one to factor in here. So it allows the opportunity to build those relationships over time, develop that brand loyalty, and ultimately boost lifetime value.
Classic on mute there. So yeah, one of the things that we've seen be really effective for a lot of our clients is actually using those email audiences directly within paid activity. So why would you do this? You can use it to amplify the messaging that you're trying to get out there on email. You can target non-openers, so actually get something in front of a wider audience, and ultimately maximize the value of your most effective audiences. So the kinds of things that can work really well here. So yeah, obviously, as I've said, targeting non-opening audiences can be kind of a really effective way of having a second chance with those users, if you like. But things like people who purchased this month last year, so I guess particularly relevant with Black Friday. So you might want to say these are all people who bought from us last Black Friday. Let's get our let's get in front of them whenever they're searching for relevant products this year, for example. Obviously deal hunters a similar kind of story there, or maybe kind of trying to hit people who maybe seem to be sort of stuck at one specific stage of the pipeline. So if you've got a load of leads that just don't really seem to be progressing, and obviously you'll be kind of emailing them and kind of trying to kind of coax them further on that journey. But another way you can kind of try and nudge them forward is to look at using those audiences through maybe a display campaign, or kind of some kind of social campaign, and just another chance to get that message in front of them that they might not be seeing if they're kind of not opening the emails, for example. And then another kind of really good one is I guess back to the fundamentals really of the reporting data. So what can we learn from either what's working well in email that can be carried across to paid, or vice versa. So what subject lines are working particularly well in email? Could they be headlines within a PPC ad? What ad copy is working well in PPC? What products are selling well? Are they things that could be promoted through your next email? So there's quite a lot of areas to kind of tap into here, because there's a wealth of data from sort of both sides of the fence, if you like, and it's kind of worth taking a step back and thinking how they could feed into each other. And then I guess a slightly more complex one that never has a very straightforward answer, but that looking at the synergy between the channels and what that kind of user journey looks like. So as we know, user journeys are far from straightforward and becoming increasingly complex all the time. But there is some data that we can see through GA around when people have maybe opened an email and then further down the line they've come back via I don't know, Facebook ad or something like that and converted. So it's kind of worth really digging into that data and understanding what is that relationship, and what seems to be kind of really triggering a lot of those initial journeys. What's particularly good at then kind of getting people over the line. Are there kind of different ways that you can get in front of those people at different times through kind of building a smart audience strategy. and you know, kind of how essentially how could you look at using the channels better to kind of work harder together. And as kind of Ben was touching on before, you know, the can we drive more value through the paid side of things in terms of building that email audience? So, you know, could you look at, rather than just kind of how do the channels kind of feed into each other, but potentially how could paid do a different job if you actually pointed it towards trying to, you know, generate email addresses, you know, as a kind of lead gen approach rather than maybe a sales driving approach, and kind of you know, you look at kind of like passing that onto the email channel, if you like, to kind of take it from there almost.
And then just one final point on AI leveraging data. So firstly, looking at it from a behavioral point of view in terms of predictions. So as Matt sort of spoke about AI earlier, it's only as good as the information that's going in. But certainly, if that's done correctly, predicting user behavior based on that historical data could be really valuable. Start to anticipate exactly what the actions of your subscribers are going to be through those paid media channels. And then just a note as well on dynamic content. So this is, you know, particularly important for email, where you can be quite targeted and specific about what content you'd like a user to see based on some of those interests and preferences that have been demonstrated beforehand with the interactions with those ads. So that's just another way in which the information collected by one tool can then enable another one.
Great, thanks very much, Ben and Matt. Hopefully, like myself, there's been some real insight there, some real nuggets to take away. So I hope other viewers like myself will take something away. Before we close off this session, just as I mentioned at the start, going to go through some questions that we've had through. So firstly, posing to both Ben and Matt, the first one is, how is the increase in the use of AI likely to impact the day-to-day lives of a marketer?
So it's a biggie, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I suppose it's kind of $1 million question, but certainly some of the kind of most obvious ones. So you know, there's a kind of big time saving element there. There is a big aspect of kind of, you know, what can you automate within your kind of current job that's then going to free up your time to do more of that kind of, you know, sort of bigger thinking and more of that kind of strategic stuff. So that's the kind of big opportunity for me, I guess is kind of passing off some of those more kind of straightforward tasks, and kind of you know, kind of I guess sort of changing up your role to an extent to make it more kind of more strategic and more impactful.
Absolutely. I mean, the only thing, and I agree with that completely, is that work with it rather than against it. That's probably the number one message from me is, those that are understanding its benefits and where it can be applied most effectively. And I think those perhaps more mundane tasks that take up time but not necessarily brain power is maybe the best starting position for AI. But I think the more you can understand where that can integrate with your own strengths, those marketers are probably going to benefit far more than those that are resistant and want to avoid it.
I think there's definitely a kind of treading a fine line thing, isn't there? That like, I think if you try and hide away from it, you are going to get left behind, and that's a lot of what you're kind of hearing in the kind of media and stuff, or in the marketing press, I guess, at the moment. But on the flip side, if you go too far the other way and just kind of put all of your faith in AI, then I mean, you know, there's probably seen plenty of you know, articles that have been put out there by some pretty big kind of media agencies that I say like publishers, if you like, that have kind of been driven by AI and have caused some pretty bad reactions in terms of, you know, if you leave the AI to do things unhindered, then it's potentially going to get you in quite a bit of hot water.
Yeah.
And then finally, just the last question before we wrap up, it is, sorting out years of bad data can be a daunting task. Where would you start to make this more manageable?
Yeah. Again, a difficult one, but certainly mapping it out before you touch anything is going to be the first thing you want to do. I think that can be the most common mistake, is realizing you've got a problem and going headfirst into it before realizing, okay, what should the overall data picture look like when this work is complete, and almost working back from there. But yes, it is a very daunting task, particularly if you've had bad practices accumulate over years.
Great.
Yeah, I think I'd agree wholeheartedly with that. I think map it out, as Ben says, and then probably look at what the simplest start point is. So, you know, rather than wait till you've got that perfect solution, you probably want to be starting with a kind of basic first step, don't you? Rather than kind of living in bad data world for kind of a really long period of time whilst you try and perfect the data that you then kind of moving forward with. It's maybe a case of going back to basics with that plan, isn't it, Ben? Once you've got there.
Yeah.
And I've just had another question come in, so we'll just squeeze this one in before wrapping up. So it's from experience, a lot of marketeers build campaigns without stopping and thinking about their own personal user and customer behavior. They expect the people they are targeting to behave in a completely unnatural way. Do you have any comments about overlaying data on user empathy?
Wow.
It's a good question, and I think it's a fair one, in that you can get, I think, a bit too wrapped up in a campaign, and actually stepping back and going with that first strategic look of, if I was a consumer, what do I want the consumer to do? And if I was that consumer, how would I go about achieving that result? It's difficult to say too much more, other than, yes, taking that step back is useful.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think I guess it's maybe about trying not to pigeonhole people too much, or trying not to be too prescriptive, isn't it? So you can look at the data, and you can kind of build a campaign plan that says, you know, we think these users behave like this and are looking for this type of thing. But maybe it's about keeping your options a bit more open, and, you know, not kind of just being like, you know, this user does this. Maybe they're more prone to kind of that type of behavior or that type of outlook, and you maybe lean into that, but maybe don't go, you know, 100% down that route. You know, maybe keep it a little bit broader.
Great. Well, thanks again, Ben and Matt. Hopefully those answers have satisfied those pain points you've had. If you have any other questions, any other pain points, then of course either myself or Ben or Matt will be more than happy to speak to you on a one-to-one basis afterwards. But for this afternoon, that's the end of the webinar. As I say, I hope you've enjoyed yourself, and I hope you join us again some point in the future. Thanks, Matt from Spike, for joining us, and have a good rest of your afternoon.
Thanks all.
Thanks a lot.